Alright, I think we're live. We're back. We're back to talk about hobby stuff. It's been, I feel, a little while since we've actually had a stream and chatted about everything. Lots has happened since then.
Yeah, it's true. Glad to be able to be back to chat with the two of you about the hobby and such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I
Post
feel,
Adepticon.
Adepticon's happened. Games Workshop has revealed a whole host of new things. Maybe that new Tyranid model was released. I don't know. I don't
Who
think anyone
knows?
really knows.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Um,
It probably was, but yeah, who knows?
I think it was. Because I sort of feel I saw people doing stuff with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. Well, with that in mind, do we want to just start the podcast portion and then we can transition to talk about other
Yeah, I think
like
we
the stuff we've
can.
been working on?
Yeah.
All right, if that's okay, I'm gonna start it.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dragged into Turbolasers, a miniature wargaming podcast from the people behind the blog Between the Bolter and Me. I'm your host, Eric Wire, and I'm here with my two brothers, Adam Wire
Hey, everybody.
and Greg Wire.
Hey everyone.
Well, nice to have the both of you here tonight. With this sort of bonus episode, I thought we could talk about some of the newly revealed models Games Workshop has been showing off the last few weeks. I feel it particularly started off with the Adepticon preview, but then there have been sort of other things expanding upon that. Two of the things that really stood out to me as being interesting were finally revealing what the Necromunda Ash Waste game
Mm-hmm.
and sort of Necromunda expansion would be like, as well as sort of the re-envisioning of the Horus Heresy and showing what the like Horus Heresy, I don't know, version 2 plastic box set would look like. So I thought, we could spend a little time just chatting about what we think about those things. Um, with that in mind, do we want to just start with the Necromunda stuff or?
Yeah, I feel of the newer things, that's probably what I was most excited about. Maybe say cautiously optimistic about. And they showed they showed a fair amount at Adepticon, mainly just in the guise of what the boxed game is going to include.
hmm Yeah, and I feel I was kind of excited about this part, or a lot of it due to just thinking about their older game Gorka Morka, which I
Mm-hmm.
think had even was sort of rumored to be. I think Andy Chambers had been involved in it, and he kind of suggested that maybe had even been thinking about doing an Ash Wastes game for Necromunda, and it didn't quite get off the ground and ended up being shifted into making Gorka Morka, which, if people aren't aware, were like a desert planet where an orc space hulk had crashed, and you just had gangs of orcs racing around the desert in ramshackle buggies and such.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically a Necromunda rule set, but with vehicles. So hearing that they were doing an Ash Waste thing finally, it kind of excited me at just the thought that maybe there was like Gorka Morka might be back per se, and that they would add vehicles and stuff and really add a new level or interest to Necromunda.
Gorkamorka was basically Mad Max the game.
That's true.
Yeah. And well, I guess I can't say I've read that much about what they've talked about with the Ash Waste, but the little that I've seen and read about it seems like it's very much almost like an extension of Necromunda that will kind of add add new things to a lot of the existing warbands, and then maybe add some new warbands as well, and have at least a light vehicle element to it.
Yeah, it very much seems like, again, this is really only looking at kind of what's included in the game and such, not reading too much, considering I don't even really know the current rules for Necromunda, but it does look more like very much like a Necromunda expansion, that there are small vehicles and things, but maybe not, or likely not, such a focus on vehicular mayhem, which Gorka Morka was, which seems a little disappointing, but I feel is fair. Like
I
they
mean,
want to stick true to what Necromunda is.
also, if you, on their community site, they have a little description of it. I'll read it. This is a brand new high-speed way of playing Necromunda with rules for vehicles, mounted figures, or fighters, I guess, and the lethal weather conditions that you can find out in the Ash Wastes. So, yeah,
It's
and
fast.
and
Which, I mean, that's not a bad thing. And I mean, perhaps in their defense here, they did reveal like a Cargo 8 model, which is like a bigger sort of vehicle than these little four-wheelers or whatnot. So, I mean, maybe there will be something there. But I guess maybe we don't need to speak too much with the rules here because that's not really, our thing. But I think regardless, anyone could try to modify Gorka Morka or change this however they want. Like, I don't think it really matters what the rules end up being, but it is exciting to finally introduce some models and some different aspects of Necromunda and the Ash Wastes to the game. So I think that's exciting. And with that in mind, we can perhaps just talk a little bit about what we think about the models.
So, I guess right off the bat, it's nice that they're releasing a new warband, which are kind of the people who live out in the Ash Wastes, so they kind of look like wandering nomads with a lot of like respirators and like water tanks and stuff like that.
They look Weedians from Sleep's Dope Smoker.
They do.
They do.
I
mean,
the models, I feel there are aspects of them that I kind of like. I sort of feel like they're, to me, they almost look like sort of sloppy sculpts. Like they're heavily encumbered with stuff, but it doesn't necessarily look, doesn't really look too natural.
I mean, they have a very, I don't know, scrappy post-apocalyptic Mad Max look to them with like the bug-eyed goggles, respirators, long coats, and like bandanas and stuff, big water/air tanks and whatnot, which I think is a fine design, and it's, I think, what people largely were expecting of them. But I think, Adam, as you're saying, they do look a little sloppy and thick almost, in the sense that every detail looks a little too large or too fat, and they look like almost like they're
Well, I mean, they're draped in
walking through molasses or something.
they're draped in a lot of cloths and such, and none of the cloths really look like they don't really look like they're cloth. They're very heavy and thick looking, which doesn't look great.
Yeah, they also have a lot of like banners and stuff on their backs, which maybe is over top of some, I don't know, rebreather, oxygen tanks, sort of scrap stuff, but it's kind of hard to tell. It just, to me, it seems like there's too much detail and without very much finesse. It kind of just very much also looks like B team, like a B team sculpt, or that they got a design out pretty quickly and then didn't go back and fine tune it or get enough direction from like a higher up art direction or whatnot. And I think it's kind of sad because I can see what they were going for here in a bunch of aspects I kind of like. And if they were really just toned back like a little bit, I think they would have like really been a lot better and like perhaps one of the cooler like new Necromunda gangs, but I feel they've just missed the mark a little bit.
Their feet to me look a little smaller than your typical Necromunda model, which is good. One thing that is also positive about them, they all have, or most of them actually have rifles with stocks, and they're actually not just your standard like Necromunda rifles and stuff. They're actually redesigned and they look a little bit different. And some of them I would say look okay. So in that sense, it's kind of good.
I would be interested to see the sprues and such, and I wonder if for some of it, like maybe you just don't give the backpacks, perhaps. I mean, this seems like a really hopeful, but perhaps some of the big oxygen or water tanks can be removed. You don't have to add them, or however the plastic is, you can remove it, and then maybe you could kind of pick and choose stuff and ultimately make some kind of cool models, or mix them with like the deathcore of Krieg models and maybe get something pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think they're okay. I think people will certainly very quickly start converting things with them, making like chaos cultists.
Their heads
and
are
stuff
pretty
like that.
cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, perhaps it's worth noting or saying, well, one thing, a lot of their poses seem all right, like kind of running and whatnot.
They're a lot better than
I think the biggest thing that should be said, though, when just conceptually and looking at the Ash Wastes box as a whole, is they are so much better than the Orlocks that come in the box.
Well, yeah, so that's the thing that
we've talked long about how we despise the Orlock kits in some of the podcasts and streams and stuff, but yeah, let it be known again, we hate the Orlock kit.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty fitting that this new boxed game, they decided they were going to include like a completely new gang, and then to really nail home the fact that no one would want to buy this, they added the Orlocks in there too. But I guess before we get to the Orlocks, these Ash Wastes Nomads, they don't seem to have vehicles. Instead, they have these giant like beetle type things that they ride. And interestingly, I sort of feel like these models, I think, look a lot nicer than just the normal ones on foot, and some of that has to do with the fact that one, the little beetle things they're riding, I feel they look pretty great. But on top of that,
cute.
on top of that, the riders themselves are they're kind of like the guys on foot, but toned down a lot. They don't have nearly as much shit on them, and
not as many additional rags on stuff, not as big backpacks, or
yeah, they just work a lot better. And they even have like their little rifles and stuff like on their backs and whatnot. Like, to me, it just looks like they were designed a lot better. And maybe the fact that they had to be sitting on these little insect things, they had to think a little harder about how they could actually do that and place like their equipment and stuff in a way that actually worked a little better.
Yeah, I really like these, and I don't know if I thought about it quite like that, but I think it is a good example of like these do a pretty good job of showing like what the general models could have looked like if there was a little bit more finesse and not just throwing everything at it at the
Mm-hmm.
design, and just having a little bit more confidence in the basic design. So I feel, and it's really, I think, impressive to think that the best thing are the cavalry sort of rider models, because oftentimes Games Workshop really struggles to make natural looking cavalry models, and it looks like they're not actually riding something,
Mm,
or like they're just placed on top of some sort of beast. And these, I think, do a good job of making it look like they're actually riding something.
yeah. So yeah, overall, I feel the little Ash Wastes Nomads, they look pretty good. I mean, I don't think I'm excited enough that I want to get any of them, but in
No.
terms of the different Necromunda gangs that have been released, these certainly aren't. They're not the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
No, I like them.
but then I guess moving on from them, they decided the second warband that they would include in the game would be one of the classic gangs from Necromunda. They decided they were gonna revisit the Orlocks, and um, I feel I'm actually kind of impressed how much they botched the Orlock vehicles, because I feel if I were to just if I think about like the Orlock range right now, what do I think of? I think of big, bumbling, clumsy, ham-fisted, um, over the top, tall, like all those weird kind of bad descriptions. And I think squats also, dwarves. And then they managed to take all of that and wrap that up into a vehicle that perfectly encapsulates all of that, I think. And for the game, they designed some of the worst looking.
Like ATV sort of trike things, which
Yeah,
is sad considering the Gene Stealer cultists have like some pretty cool, like, I don't know, dirt bike models and this Ridge Racer thing that suggests that they could make some kind of cool all terrain like vehicles. But the Orlocks have these really squat, short looking vehicles that just
A
they're,
look like the
strong wind storm would blow them over.
yeah. See, they're
They're
also really
often,
tall, and
yeah.
they don't look like they're balanced at all.
Yeah,
which,
that's
yeah,
what I mean. Like if you were doing a quick turn, that thing would flip.
Yeah,
yeah, like I feel it just fits so well with the just Orlock
clumsy.
design, which I mean, I guess maybe good on them that they kept with that design, that they kept with their guns, but the design's so bad that it's just like you have to shake your head, and like what a way to like completely lose my interest by making these and taking the worst gang design with the fattest sausage legs that seemingly have no articulation points with balloon hands, weird looking feet. Like,
I mean, these
I,
are just such. The whole design was such an afterthought that, to me, looking at them, it's hard for me not to think that they're just a complete joke, and
well, and
that the
about being
designers thought they were a complete joke and were doing everything they could to make you
yeah,
realize they were a
yeah.
joke.
Well, like I think about being top heavy, or like that they like just they don't have a like the center of gravity on these is not low to the ground, which is
Mm-mm.
what you would want for like an all-terrain sort of vehicle. Like they sit so high on this thing, which is like on in some sense it's exactly like what we were saying about how I was surprised that the bug riders looked like a good cavalry sort of unit that actually felt like they were riding this thing in a natural way. This, like, it just looks like practically they took a regular Orlock model, didn't do much to it, and just like, yeah, we can shove that on top of a vehicle thing.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Like, they should be
and another
so
way,
much lower on that
in
construction.
like true to Orlock fashion, they don't have necks. They literally don't have necks. And in terms of like lazy joke like design, the gunner in the back of the buggy, it's like they really didn't want to put in any design effort or anything in that, because like look at how they're holding and aiming the gun. It it's like
Yeah,
almost baffling.
yeah, it really does seem like they just wanted to take some assets that they had and do as little work as possible to just shove them together.
Because
Um,
like they kind of tried to make it look like the gunner is like aiming or something, but in each case, like they're just looking at the back of the weapon. I
it, just bad.
They're baffling.
I I think it's not. I think we can even just move on from this. Like the Orlocks are bad. These are equally bad. They didn't use this as an opportunity to improve things, which is unfortunate. Um, I think we could spend a little time mentioning that there is some terrain included in the box, which actually looks pretty neat and I think will actually be useful to a lot of different like gamers and such, even
Mm-hmm.
for something like Gorka Morka or just other like Ink 28 games and stuff, which are these interesting little, I don't know, raised huts with some little walkways and such. And I think they're cool looking, and it's neat that they just look a little bit different from other like kind of Warhammer scenery and such. And I think that's fun. And I could see hopefully they'll release some of these separately, and I assume they will. But I think a lot of people will probably want to get some of these just to combine it with other terrain and
Mm-hmm.
to make sort of battlefields and such that aren't just within a hive or like the Zone Mortalis stuff. And I think that's fun.
Yeah, like overall, I think the terrain looks pretty nice. And I think of everything in the boxed game, that's probably the thing to get most excited about. Um, though, yeah, I don't know. Like,
I'll be excited. Almost the thing I'm most excited about is to see if the designer talks a little bit about the design, because a lot of their other terrain kits, they put a lot of effort such that they are like the heights are correct, such that they can fit with other pieces of terrain and such, so you can do some
mm-hmm.
interesting mixing and matching. And it would be cool if a similar thought went into these, but ultimately, I look forward to hearing a little bit more about it. And so ultimately, the Ash Waste box seems like some good things, a bunch of sort of misses, but I'm still excited that it exists, and it'll be neat to see maybe some of the other gangs getting some vehicles and whatnot, and hopefully
Yeah,
some of them are a little bit more substantial and not just like little ATVs or something, but we'll
yeah, I
have to
don't know.
see.
I really would have hoped that they would have put in a little more design work and effort into like everything in the game. I mean, I would say pretty much everything's pretty good except all the Orlock stuff. And I
Hmm.
think yeah, I wonder how many people are kind of in our boat where it's like the notion, like, maybe I could see getting this, like, up Orlocks, nope, I'm out.
Yeah, because it'll probably be almost $300 or something, or at least 200 something, and it's just like hard. It's just too hard to justify. But if the other warband was pretty cool looking, I think it would be a lot easier to sell. But I don't know. Maybe we want to move on to sort of the next aspect that we wanted to chat about, which is the second edition of Horus Heresy, where
Did we want to talk about the Cargo 8?
I I don't think we need to talk about it. Like I feel at some point in the
Yeah,
future when more Ash Waste stuff's released, we could chat about it and other things, but
that's fair. Yeah, so I guess maybe the biggest reveal of Adepticon, or what they tried to make the biggest reveal, was they had kind of a clumsy animated short video about the Horus Heresy to announce that they're releasing a new version of the Horus Heresy, and including new plastic Space Marine models. And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
at the time, after showing the kind of janky, clumsy video, they showed like a picture of a plastic Praetor and a plastic Space Marine. And then since then, they've slowly been showing some more pictures of some of the plastic Praetors and Space Marines. And the stuff's certainly pretty interesting. And it's also gotten a bunch of people in the various communities talking. Some very excited, others
Yeah,
not as
as
excited.
yeah, others as you'd expect, upset that like, oh, it's not the pure Horus Heresy stuff from before, like that's not the correct armor mark or whatnot. So kind of the standard stuff you'd expect.
And I mean, I
But
feel some of those complaints and stuff are certainly warranted. Um, though maybe some of it, depending on how it's presented, can be a little misplaced. But
yeah, in particular because we don't really know the extent or scope of what they plan to do with this.
mhm.
Hopefully there'll be this box set, but then there will be subsequent releases of maybe some of the different armor marks, um, at least the ones that haven't already gotten a plastic kit, and other different things. But it's hard to know yet. But with that said, I guess the main thing that we should talk about is they finally revealed some better pictures of the Mark 6, like sort of beaky Marines.
Well, so I guess,
So
yeah, the one thing related to that, what are you like? I know right when these were shown, there were a lot of people who were excited and whatnot, and then there were also some people complaining that this wasn't maybe the best armor variant to choose because it was maybe an armor variant that wasn't very well liked in the Heresy, and only a few legions really used it heavily. And if you're big into the lore and other stuff like that, um, I could see that maybe rubbing you a little bit of the wrong way. But I guess at least where I'm sitting, to me it seems like this was very much their time. They want to come back and actually do something for the Horus Heresy for the first time in a long time. And they really wanted to play up on nostalgia and say, hey
yeah,
guys, remember those old Rogue Trader plastic space brains that look janky as hell that you kind of loved? Well, we redesigned them and they're back.
yeah, like could it really have been anything else? Like they
Yeah.
they had almost like it would have been such a lost opportunity to not like decide like, hey, over 30 years later or whatnot, We're redesigning the classic version 1, whatever, Space Marine Beaky kit, and we're gonna have some of the same features, like the chain blade on the front of the bolters. They're gonna be beakies. They're gonna have the really broad feet and all these things. Like, it makes sense that they would want to do this. And also, just looking back at a lot of the Rogue Trader artwork before, like, the actual Horus Heresy lore had really completely solidified or even been written, like, a lot of the Space Marines were this beaky armor. So I think it makes a lot of sense that they would make these, particularly considering they didn't already have a plastic kit like this. They had the Mark III and Mark IV that are both pretty terrible because of the janky Space Marine proportions, but these ones, like, what do we think about these? How do, and what their proportions are like?
Well, I feel of all the Heresy armor marks, these are leagues better than all of those.
And I think these are a fair bit better than just all the plastic Space Marines, other than like Primaris, in terms of at least some effort being put to improve proportions and whatnot.
Yeah, I feel we'll have to wait until they show a lot more scale pictures and stuff, but to me they look like they're relatively similar in scale to the Primaris Space Marines. I guess, though, in that being said, I feel maybe they're a little closer to some of the newer plastic Chaos Space Marines, where they kind of sort of kept the old proportions of Space Marines, but made them a little larger and maybe made their legs a little bigger. So, quickly looking at these, I think overall they look quite good. Maybe their torso is a little short, and
Yeah,
maybe their feet and lower legs are maybe a little too big. Like, I get they're wanting to make them big, bulky, and broad.
And fit the kind of that initial Jess Goodwin design, but I think they could have just done a little bit more to change it, and it really would have still had the same effect. But I do feel their proportions seem a little bit better, and I mean, we can't really tell for sure until we have some comparison stuff, but it almost to me looks like the heads were made a little smaller, such that a lot of the regular Space Marine models look so bad because, like, their heads are gigantic, their feet are gigantic, there's no torso, and like, it just makes all the proportions look so weird. Whereas I feel with this, the slightly smaller beaky helmets help sort of remove some of the awkwardness of, like, wait, what's going on there? How would this fit? And it's a little distorted because, again, these really large legs, but I still think they are a lot better than what we've had before. And I'm honestly pretty excited to get some of them maybe and try to assemble them and just compare it to some of, like, the models that we've converted, or like my true scale in quote unquote Dark Angels that were made from some Primaris models. I'd like to see how do these compare, maybe paint them in a similar style and see what they look like.
I think one of the other big things that, like, jumped out at me immediately, there don't appear to be a lot of leg poses for these models, and on top
I think there might only be 4, which is kind of a shame.
But on top of that, the poses that they've chosen are kind of a weird dichotomy of choosing the extreme worst poses they've ever done for Space Marines, and then some of the best. Like, 2 of the poses are kind of striding forward, and those are by far the nicest, because since they're actually moving in a way where you actually do, they're kind of standing up much straighter than standard Space Marine poses, and they look very good for a Space Marine. But then on the other side, they really go in hard for the Space Marine bow-legged squatting pose, where their legs are spread out to the extreme. And let me tell you, those are some of the worst looking leg poses I've seen in a long time.
And it's really made obvious by the sergeant model they showed, that there's a picture of the sergeant next to another one, which they both have the same dumb legs. But seeing those wide legs with that sergeant without like a bolter in front of his torso really emphasize how not great that looks.
Well, yeah, I mean,
But
just
I feel
stand
just
like,
using one of the other leg poses would
also,
make
like,
the model pretty cool.
yeah, I mean, half of the legs are completely unusable. I mean, just if you're listening to this right now, stand up and try and take the pose of one of these Space Marines. Like, I could argue most people may have never even taken a pose once in their life. Maybe never. Like, they are so awkward and outrageous. I almost feel like whoever sculpted those and chose those poses should feel ashamed.
You're trying it, Greg.
Like, they're so bad.
Yeah, so
And
I really
so
hope
that is
that,
like a huge fail.
yeah, I really hope that if this is sort of like a snap fit sort of release, that they release another kit that have like a few more leg poses and such. Like that would really be nice. But oh, in the chat it says, yeah, the metal power stance. Like, yeah, that does kind of fit bad.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like it's a bad pose. But I feel maybe this is Games Workshop we're talking about, so the fact that like half the poses are good is nice to see, and at least for people like the three of us who kind of selectively build models to make little kill teams and whatnot, it's not a big deal for me because I wouldn't have been trying to build all of these. But hopefully there will be some additional poses that you can get some way or another. I think it is worth noting that the bolters I feel look pretty good. Like they have it's the Umbra pattern bolter, and while still too big, I think in my opinion, they're still probably one of the smaller bolters GW has designed, and I think it looks pretty good. I mean, unfortunately, the magazine release is in the wrong spot, such that they couldn't really change the magazine without using two hands, but that's just more of Games Workshop designers never using or looking at a gun before. Like, it is nice that one of them, at least one of them, has like good trigger control and isn't just like shooting the bolter.
Yeah, that's
and
nice.
That's a good example of you can see the magazine release not working because the trigger finger can't reach the magazine release without like moving his hand like and taking it off the pistol grip. So that's classic GW mistake. But
one other thing that's sort of nice about a lot of these bolters, certainly not all of the poses, but at least several of them, they've actually even kind of given you the arm positioning is positioned in a way that you could actually sort of add in a stock, at least in some of the poses. And so that's kind of nice for people who like to go in and try and add those themselves. So that's pretty good. I guess one other thing that, if we go back to the legs, I think a lot of these legs, one other positive it looks like there was at least a little more design effort and thought put into where some of the joints are, such that while they're certainly not perfect, it's much, you can actually tell like the person inside this could move around a little bit better without like the armor plates crashing up into their like hips and all this other bullshit. And while they didn't do a good job of showing pictures here, I've seen some pictures that were floating around online sort of suggesting that they also largely sculpted the butts on the Space Marines, which is great.
In the videos, they have some videos that show like very briefly show a 360, which makes it clear there was at least some effort, a little bit more thought placed on that, which is cool. Like it's just nice to see that when they had this opportunity to slightly redesign like a Space Marine armor, they did some basic steps to improve that. Unlike, let's say, the newer Chaos Space Marine releases, where they just didn't change anything, just made them bigger, but no better. So it's nice that there's some improvement here, and it's, I don't know, it bodes well for like the future of the Horus Heresy, and that there could be new models that like actually look good. I did see that some people, assuming that this is a 32 millimeter base, they tried to like adjust the size of the image next to a Primaris Space Marine, which that sort of suggests that these are still a fair bit smaller than a Primaris Space Marine, which I feel that would be a bit of a disappointment, but and if that's the case, they will almost certainly be really small looking compared to like a Gene Stealer Cultist or an Imperial Guard model, which
that being said is also interesting because Forge World has slowly started making new Praetor models for different legions, and a lot of those models are much larger in scale, closer to a lot of the Primaris stuff, and maybe even larger than them. So it'll be interesting to see because people are already complaining about those, saying that they're changing the scale and it doesn't look right with the rest of my army. So it's interesting if these are then kind of another scale.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll have to see.
Ultimately, when we are able to get some of them, I'm sure we'll make a blog post or two comparing some of the models to the Primaris, other plastic Marines and whatnot, because my hope is that they're similar to Primaris size, perhaps slightly smaller, but if they're at least similar, I'll be pretty happy. But ultimately, we just have to wait and see.
Yeah. So in addition to just the normal models, they also have shown some of like the plastic Praetors, and so I feel some of these Praetor models, that's when they got quite a lot of flack too.
I think these got the most hate, and sort of thinking like they're taking this sort of Spartan Horus Heresy look and like Age of Sigmarifying it, like making it gaudier and weirder. And I can see that where they're going at it with that, but I think my general thought is they still have the Horus Heresy backdrop, so it's not going to change hugely, but I'm all for like changing stuff a little bit and making some more interesting looking models. Having said that, looking at the Praetor models, they have some issues, mainly being that their poses, particularly the Imperial Fist one, that they
Fucking
revealed. Like,
awful
who
pose.
terrible pose. Like, that's the worst thing
This is
about it.
really that power metal pose because their foot is up in the air almost like it's up on an amp or something. And I know there were a bunch of people comparing this Praetor model with the kind of the classic Forge World Praetor models, and was trying to make an argument that this was so much worse than those. And I mean, honestly, to me, they don't look very different.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of these, like the sculpting on it looks like really good. Like there's some little belts and stuff that look really nice. Um I think it looks really good. It's just the pose is pretty terrible. Like the sword looks kind of cool, but so large that it's just incredibly stupid. Um
He has their two heads, both of which have the weird kind of crazy mohawk thing, which I think that the crazy mohawk thing is what people hate. And I'll
mhm.
admit it's pretty stupid looking, but I will also say both of the Praetor models that they've shown are quite a bit more interesting than I was expecting them to be. I wouldn't say any of them are great, but they're at least more interesting
Yeah, I
and a
think they have
little
a lot
more
of character.
yeah, they're a little more thought provoking than a lot of the other stuff. And that being said, they're still leagues better than the two Praetor models from, was it Battle for Calth or whatever,
Mhm.
where they had one in like the Terminator armor and one in power armor, and the dude in
Oh
power
yeah,
armor
so
with
much
the
better.
plasma pistol, that might be the worst scaled plastic space marine ever made.
Yeah, and it makes it incredibly obvious if you look at the sprues and how it goes together. But
That it's so
I
fucked.
mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, I'm excited to see what else they have in store for the Horus Heresy. Like they're better than I anticipated, and certainly there's gonna be some hits and misses, but I think it
Mm-hmm.
ultimately looks like it has a fairly bright future if they get a lot more plastic releases that are of this general quality. I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a lot to look forward to and a lot of pieces and parts that will be helpful for making some cool space marines and just seeing new plastic space marines that are not Primaris is somewhat unexpected, and to see them
Mm-hmm.
make at least some slight changes to the formula to make them look better, kind of like Primaris made some changes to make Space Marines better, that's ultimately a net positive. So I'm excited to, see where it goes. Um, I don't
Yeah.
know, maybe we've sort of reached the end of our talking topics here. Like just have to wait and see, and I'm sure there's lots that we can talk about in the future when more is revealed and we actually get our hands on some of the models, which who knows when that will be. But I'm excited for that. Admittedly, I don't really foresee us buying the boxed game, whatever it'll
Mm-mm.
be, because I'm sure it'll be really expensive and too much of everything. But I don't know, maybe we can eBay one of the squads or whatnot. I don't know. We'll have to
Yeah.
see, but I'm still generally excited about it.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what other like plastic things they actually make.
Hmm.
Hopefully they make some nice plastic vehicles and stuff.
No, yeah, agreed. It would be cool to have like a plastic Sakaran or something like that,
Yeah.
just to make it easier to assemble such a tank. Um,
Yeah, so overall, I think a positive step forward. I mean, really anything is a positive step forward for the Horus Heresy because essentially
It's
they've been
been
getting a drip feed for years, and
Yeah, I feel they took something that people had been so excited about for and slowly ground it to a halt. And even
mhm,
when they started releasing the newer Siege books, which is like ramping up, like we're finishing the heresy, like this is exciting, it didn't do much to actually um,
mhm,
build on that excitement to get people to want to play the game. So hopefully this will be that.
yeah, it'll certainly bring in new people.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I guess with that, maybe we want to wrap this up.
Yeah,
All right. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for listening. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about these models. Let us know on our Discord channel or on the blog or through Instagram. But yeah, with that, we'll talk to you again soon, everybody.
we did it.
We did do it. We did it. It was like 49 minutes long.
That's a pretty good length for a podcast, at least for ours.
Yeah, it didn't go overly long, but I feel we can still keep chatting about other stuff.
Yeah. Well, speaking
Uh,
of Space
and I
Marines,
guess in the comments there, yeah, David, it's cool to see that you've been kind of following some of the Real Broken Fingers videos and such to modify some models, like, and as you suggested, all of those sorts of modifications, however you go about it, end up being a lot of work. But
mhm,
I think it's usually worth it. But if you're trying to make like huge legions or whatever, like that's so much work that I guess you just have to prioritize like what you're trying to do. Like, is it the joy of building and creating models? Are you more about trying to play in tournaments or whatnot? And like, if you're doing that sort of stuff, I can see how it might not be worth the effort. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Oh yeah, well, as I was saying, speaking of Space Marines, I've my most of my hobby time as of late has been spent working on trying to build a Space Marine from one of the Lunax 7070 like Marines that I modified and we made a mold for, which we talk about on the blog. So yeah, we made that mold. It worked okay. We got a bunch of um cast components, and I guess for most of like the past 15 days or so, I've been working on trying to assemble a model from that. And I feel it's gone pretty well. It's taken a lot longer than maybe I was anticipating. I was maybe a little naive in thinking that maybe I could assemble something in about a
like
week. And well, I failed that pretty hard. But I guess,
well, I feel like you said, even though the cast and the stuff you made was designed to make assembling one of the Lunax models a little bit easier, like it still wasn't, it still didn't make it easy. Like there's still a lot of work to do to make sure
yeah,
the
and
pose was good. And
I think part of part of the yeah, the other thing is, since the scale of the model is so big and so different from kind of what I'm accustomed to working with, there was kind of a lot of trial and error trying to figure out components and stuff that would kind of work with the model, and then kind of a lot of labor involved in posing everything to make it look at least relatively believable. And
And I feel you made the pose is very reminiscent of that classic Karl Kapinski Crimson Fist artwork that
yeah, it is actually
is
very
both
similar.
loved and hated.
It has a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Mainly the Marine's head.
Yeah, way too small. But
Um,
I feel here you have the opportunity to make something better from that.
yeah, I'm still working on the head for the model. One of the things that's been kind of interesting trying to find a head for the model, like just about all of the heads that they've made for Space Marines, they're all really small. Like even like we have the Forge World Lionel Johnson model. His helmeted head isn't any larger than your standard Space Marine helmets, which like almost shocked me because
Like the model is much bigger than a standard Space Marine.
yeah, and his unhelmeted head is also quite a bit larger, so his head just wouldn't fit in his helmet.
Yeah, it's a uh real shame. Which I mean that kind of speaks to a general thing as you were trying to convert this and add arms and stuff. There was like many surprises like that as you were trying to find a head.
Yeah,
And
so one of the biggest surprises is so a lot, maybe like a year or two ago, Greg, he sent me a copy of the plastic Gilliman model in the thought that maybe we could use some components of that. And the main thing was, oh, that model might be a source of a larger helmeted Space Marine head, because um, finding a larger Space Marine helmet is just about impossible. And well, surely the Gilliman model, since he's so big, would have a larger helmet. Well, it turns out his helmet really isn't any larger than a standard Space Marine helmet, which sort of baffled me.
yeah, baffling.
Because so much of the rest of the model is so much larger than a normal Space Marine, but his head wasn't any different. And so on this model here that I'm working on, both of the arms were taken from that plastic Gilliman model, and I feel they work pretty well on a model of this scale. Another thing that was surprising with the Gilliman model, his hand holding the Emperor's flaming sword is like no larger than a standard Space Marine hand, which was also baffling considering he is so much larger than a standard Space Marine or even Terminator. So here, for some of like the plastic arms, I sort of resculpted some of the armor plating to make the arms and the forearms and stuff look a little larger.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah, wow, I can't believe that for such a large model that so many of the components were just normal Space Marine size, which admittedly even Abaddon, the newer plastic
mhm.
Abaddon that has elements that are pretty large and improved some Terminator aspects, it also has like pin-sized head too, right?
Yeah, it's like not very different than a normal Space Marine and stuff. So um there were a lot of moments like that where I was almost baffled. One of the other things that I was sort of happy to use, the model, he's holding a plasma pistol, and the plasma pistol was taken from one of the new like the lock
Then
weapons and
sprues.
upgrade sprues. So I know on one of the previous streams we talked a lot about how some of those weapons in there could actually be good for converting different special weapons for Space Marines. And so this was the first model that I actually played around with at least a little bit of those weapons. And well, this plasma pistol, I took one of those plasma pistols from the box and sort of cut off maybe a quarter of the bottom of the weapon, and then attached like the Space Marine Terminator hand. So that being said, I still ended up cutting off a bunch of the bottom of the pistol, and it's still, at least in my eyes, looks pretty large on this model. And this is a very big model. Like, when I finally finish the conversion, we'll have a post or so on the blog. We'll probably have some scale pictures. But
do you have any now next to? Or I mean, we can just say, like, because he's like bigger than the Guilliman, like the Forge World Guilliman Primarch, right?
Yeah, he stands a head or two taller than the Forge World Guilliman model. He's about the same size as the Forge World Lionel Johnson model. Though the Lionel Johnson model is not standing up straight. So almost feel if Lionel Johnson was standing up straight, he'd actually be slightly taller than this model. Which again is sort of baffling, because if you use Lionel Johnson's helmeted head on this model, it just wouldn't look right because it's too small.
I feel it has the wings that kind of try to like obfuscate the fact that it's too small.
Yeah, it does.
It's way too small.
The Forge World Guilliman model, his unhelmeted head, I feel actually looked okay on the model. Maybe I feel was a little small, but not unusable, I would say. But yeah, so it's been a long process. One of the interesting asides, on this model, I had modified some boots from a plastic Necromunda Goliath model, and those were what I was initially using for the feet on the model, and they work pretty well. But during the conversion, I got the idea that maybe some of the the Phobos Primaris Space Marine armor from Shadow's Pair, those might work well. And that is what I ended up using on the model. Those feet work really well on like a model of this scale. Like, they're very well detailed. They look like they have more articulation than like most other, like certainly Terminator feet. So I think overall that worked pretty well. Another thing that I learned while working on this model, if you ever have to go and sculpt the kind of ribbing and stuff in between the joints of Space Marine armor, I found if you put the green stuff in the joint and smooth it out, if you then wait for about an hour and a half, and then come back with an X-Acto knife to press in the ribbing, it works a lot better than if you try and press that in immediately. when the green
Mhm.
stuff is still fresh. Because if you let it harden for a little bit, it keeps its shape a lot better, and there's more resistance while you're doing it, such that if you have the general shape already there, and now you press in the individual little lines and creases, it maintains its shape better, and it's much easier to do. So, I know a lot of people that I've talked to really hate sculpting in that soft part between the joints. Well, that's a
That
tip that
helps a
can make it
lot.
a lot
Yeah.
easier. The only problem with it is if you mess that up, then you're probably not going to. You'll probably just have to cut it out or sculpt over top of it, because
Mhm.
the putty's not nearly as malleable anymore, and you can't really fix it thereafter. So
Yeah, okay. Did you
but
use like an X-Acto knife to push it in, or?
I did.
Yeah, okay.
So that I feel worked pretty well.
Yeah, now the model's looking great. It'll be cool to see it finished and ultimately painted.
Yeah, actually, kind of. The more I look at it, just having Gilliman's head, the Forge World one, I think actually works pretty well.
Mhm.
I do think maybe it's a little small, but if you kind of like the notion of having smaller headed Space Marines, that it would work there. But
Mhm.
some of the normal, like Mark II Forge World heads, they look, at least in my opinion, look terrible on the model. They're just way, way too small.
Mhm.
So I guess if you're kind of going for that Chad scale look, um,
Yeah, I
maybe it's
guess it's
okay.
fine.
But I was never too keen on that. So yeah,
No.
so that's what I've been spending my time on. I'm hoping in the next day or so the conversion will be done, and then we'll
Mhm.
start. Eric, you and I, we can start painting the model.
Nah, yeah, I'm excited to start it.
I'm sort of excited to see what the model will look like beside all the other Dark
Mhm.
Angels that you've painted. Like he's gonna be really big.
Yeah, he sure will. But it'll be cool to compare them.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I've been working on. It's been a learning experience, I feel.
Mhm.
But good.
Yeah, I can't say I've been up to a whole lot, but hopefully some painting here
Hmm.
soon.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe with that we want to wrap this up.
Yeah, I feel we've covered. We recorded the podcast. We've talked about what I've been working on, so
Yeah, now I feel it'd be cool to see that stuff finished.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess thanks everybody for coming out and chatting with us and listening to us ramble
Mhm.
on about uh yet to be released models.
Yep. Thanks everybody.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Stay safe, stay healthy, keep on enjoying the hobby, and we will talk to you again soon. Until next
Yep.
time,
See you
over and
everybody.
out.
See ya.